take a step back, take a look at what you have to offer to influencers and write it down, like actually put it down on paper, have it next to where you work and look at it so you empower yourself to create these connections. So list, these are the 10 things I could potentially do for influencers and have them close to you.
Get ready to build, protect, and sell your expertise online with the Online Genius Podcast. You'll laugh. We hope you won't cry. But you'll always be informed and prepared so you can have the success you want. Here's your host, Bobby Klink.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Online Genius Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klink, and I'm really excited for today's show because we're going to be talking about a topic that is really important to entrepreneurs, and I think entrepreneurs kind of get it, but a lot of times they don't employ it or they don't know the right words to use for it. And that's influencer marketing. From my own business, I know this can actually be one of the most effective forms of marketing for you. So I think this is going to be a really great episode. And it's going to be a great episode because I have a great guest. Today's guest is named Cloris Kylie. Now, Cloris, marketing MBA and influencer marketing specialist, shows you how to create a strong marketing foundation and tap into connections with influencers to grow a magnificent business that thrives over the long term. Now, she's the best-selling author of Beyond Influencer Marketing and the host of the Beyond Influencer Marketing podcast. She's been featured on network television, on a top-ranked podcasts and YouTube shows, including the #1 podcast for entrepreneurs, Entrepreneurs on Fire. Now, Cloris's articles have been published on websites with millions of followers, such as Tiny Buddha, Mind Body Green, and Addicted to Success. Her unique background in industrial engineering and marketing allows her to design efficient and effective solutions for her clients, but Cloris knows you need more than tactics to succeed. That's why she also empowers you to, as she says, reveal your magnificence. Welcome to the Online Genius Podcast, Cloris.
Bobby, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Now, I'm excited to talk about influencer marketing because I know how important it is to my business, and I know it's something that my listeners can really employ in their business to start growing. But I always like to get to know my guests a little bit before we start. And in preparing for the interview, you told me that you taught spinning and exercise classes for many years as you grew your first business. Now, first, I want to ask you, what was that first business?
Actually, it was an offline business. I was an academic advisor and coach for high school students and college students. And what I was doing was I was helping them get to the next step in their academic career, right? So, I loved working with the students and so forth. I actually relied a lot on the power of connections to grow that business because I had a great relationship with all the guidance counselors of the high schools and colleges where I live here in Connecticut. So they actually were my source of referrals. I didn't have to do any advertising. So it was a fun business. It changed a lot of lives. But, I've always been very active and love exercise. So, at the gym where I was working, I've had that opportunity to become an instructor working out. So I had the opportunity and I took it and I loved it. So, it became my thing on the side.
Well, let me ask you this. What did you learn from kind of doing that at the same time that you were building your business? Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs, treat their business first as a side hustle before they're able to actually make the leap. So I'm guessing you learned some valuable lessons that you could share with listeners.
Well, I would say as an entrepreneur, it's important that, we work in this kind of like confined environment, right? We have our mini world and it's easy to lose perspective on what's out there, how the world works really. So it's good that you have a balanced life, that you have, the input from different people and just get to see what's really working and not working to connect with people. I think because, we are in the business of building relationships, regardless of what you do. That's what we do all day. We build relationships with partners, we build relationships with potential clients, with our audiences, and that's what it's all about. So just by doing different things, you can bring that balance into your life. And then at the same time, you have that creativity be sparked by those new experiences. I had one opportunity that I was growing my business in the wrong way. And that's what actually created this interest in me to explore influencer marketing. And I was so burned out, Bobby, that I woke up one day and said, okay, this is it. I'm done. I quit. I'm just going to cash out of my savings and travel around the world. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't care about the future. I just wanted to leave. I wanted to escape. And the only thing that helped me get out of that was to take time off. I just, left for that day. I just went to the coast and walked for hours, and just seeing something different and having a different environment and perspective. That's what allowed me to come up with new ideas, and that's how basically I saved my business, by changing the way I was doing things. So, never underestimate the power of just changing your environment, adding new things into your life as an entrepreneur. But of course, at the same time, focus on one thing if you really want to grow your business.
I think that's great advice, because I know that I often have my best business ideas not when I'm sitting in front of my computer, but when I'm doing something else and my mind is, on something else, but evidently it's processing these things in the background. So I think that's definitely great advice for people to follow. But now I do want to turn to influencer marketing, the reason I brought you on. And I just want to start with the basics. What is influencer marketing?
Influencer marketing is the ability to create connections with those who have an existing audience, and that audience is perfect for you. It's your ideal audience. So it's that ability to connect with them, so they introduce you to that captive audience, so you instantly build authority and you can connect with those people and have them become your subscribers, your buyers, much more quickly than if you use, for example, advertising and other ways to reach out to people.
Well, now let me get you to give us some specifics here. What are some examples of influencer marketing where you would get in front of the influencer's audience?
Well, you know what most people think about when they hear the term influencer marketing is either Instagram stars, right? Like they have 1 million followers and they're going to show my product and everybody's going to buy it. That's what it is. So I pay the influencer, so-called influencer on Instagram, and that's it. And that's the deal. And then there's another train of thought that considers influencers celebrities. So I'm just going to send my book to Oprah. She'll promote it. That's it. That's all I need to grow my business. But really, influencers, in my mind, and that's why I called it my book Beyond Influencer Marketing, is anyone who has a captive audience that is perfect for you. And that audience doesn't have to be of 1 million followers or billions of people, whoever. It has to be a captive, engaged audience. So for example, if you connect with a coach or a trainer who has an online business, and that person has a Facebook group of 500 people, even 1,000 people who are super engaged and who really trust this coach or trainer, then you're connecting with an influencer. And think about the possibilities. If this influencer then has you as a guest on their Facebook live show, or they have you as a guest for their group coaching clients, something like that, you reach a smaller audience, but it's a captive audience. So I invite you to expand your concept of influencer marketing and what you perceive of it, and start seeing opportunities all around you. I mean, meet up groups in your area that have a captive audience of people who go every single week to go to that meeting. The library, if you have a presentation at the library and you actually have a good group of entrepreneurs who go to that library, that's who you want to reach. Just think about people who have those niche audiences, but the perfect audiences for you.
Yeah, and I think that's a great piece of advice. And as we're recording this, listener, we're in the middle of the GDPR lead up. It's 2 days before the law goes into effect. And I can give you an example of doing this myself. Literally yesterday, someone reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm going to do a live in my Facebook group about GDPR. I want to talk about it. Can you come on and talk?" And I said, "Sure." Why not? And so I went on and I was able to literally track that. I think, I was on there for 30 minutes and, they were engaged. This was their leader or one of their leaders. And I got, I think 3 sales literally last night. And I mean, I did it at 7:00 and I got 3 sales and that was an easy choice for me. Of course, I'm going to talk to them because, it was probably a group of say 30 people, but they were people who would care. And so I think that's good, Cloris, that you talk about. Don't think it has to be people in the millions.
Exactly.
But what are some of the kind of platforms that people might be looking at and thinking, to look at? I think, we talked about Facebook Live, and I know one you talk about is podcast, but what are some other kinds of places where you might have someone who has a following that you should think about that might be a good opportunity?
Well, besides podcasts, local groups, even local businesses, which people I think often forget. Because what if, for example, if you are a parenting coach and you give a presentation at the local toy store, you have a captive audience. So think about that too. But in the online world, think about guest posting. That's such a powerful strategy because that's something I did when I was promoting my first book. At the time, I was, again, driving myself crazy, posting articles every day that nobody read. So that's when I came up with this idea. What if I instead post my articles on somebody else's site, a site that already has a bunch of subscribers or readers, and that way I can reach my people. And that's what I did. So I posted my article on Tiny Buddha, that first article, and I was just amazed at how many people visited my website, how many people started to subscribe for my list. I was so tiny at the time. And then I continued guest posting. And the more I posted articles, and the more my list grew. So that's a really powerful strategy as well. So don't underestimate that. Of course, it has to be the right platform for your ideal client. So if you know, for example, that your ideal client doesn't really like podcasts, maybe you're targeting the senior population, and they are not into podcasts, then don't do that. You have to do something that really resonates with your ideal client and with you. If you really hate writing, then don't do guest posts. It has to be something that is kind of like a natural fit for you.
Right. I think that's awesome advice for people to think about that and think, where are your customers? And Cloris, I'm guessing you found this too. At some point after you do enough of it, you start to build up steam, and the influencers start coming to you rather than you even having to go to influencers, because you kind of get to be known. For example, you're now known as someone who can talk about influencer marketing. So people will reach out to you and it gets easier and easier. Is that a generally fair statement?
Yeah, it really, it builds pretty rapidly. And, once you create those connections, if you nurture those connections, then they will think of you when it's time to make an introduction, right? So that's what it's all about, that you stay in touch with everybody, at least with the people who you feel you have similar values, and, you can still deliver value to them. And you will see how they will lead you to new connections. And those new connections will open the doors to many more opportunities.
Yep. I think that's a fantastic way to look at it. Now, I do want to shift and ask you a kind of questions in a couple of different areas. And one of them is the mindset issue. And I like talking to my guests about this because as I've gone on my entrepreneurial journey, I've discovered that with most every challenge, there is a mindset issue that's there that we have to address. What are the mindset issues that stop people from engaging in influencer marketing or prevent them from being effective at it?
Yeah, well, I think the most important block or mindset block that people have is their belief that they're not ready. It's like, oh, yeah, this influencer marketing, that sounds great. I will do it when I have X number of subscribers, when I have X revenue, when I publish my bestseller. They wait for this special moment when finally they will be able to connect with influencers. But the reality is that you are ready now, right now. Why? Because if you have something of value to offer to an influencer, then you're ready. Because that's what it's all about. It's about delivering value. And that mindset, that philosophy of how can I give value first, that really comes from the heart. That's what will really allow you to succeed. So just knowing that you can deliver value to an influencer is the first step to realize that. And that's actually another block, because people say, well, okay, so I'm ready if I can deliver value. What value do I have to offer right now if my business is so small and so forth? Well, something as simple as supporting the influencer's message on social media. Something as simple as posting a review of their podcast on iTunes or posting a review of their book on Amazon, and of course, letting them know that you're delivering value. Creating a testimonial. If you join one of their products or programs, just say how it changed your life and send that testimonial to them. You're delivering value. And once you do that, then the relationship starts and you can nurture that relationship.
So you talked about two things there. And the first one is the imposter syndrome. And listeners, I want you to understand the imposter syndrome is real. It's not that you're not worthy. It's a syndrome that we all have. And I share this with people because they can't believe it often. I graduated from Harvard Law School with honors. And when I first started doing some of these things on my own in my own business, I said, well, who am I to be giving this, legal advice or this legal education? So I think you have to break through that. But Cloris, how do you suggest that people can kind of get past that belief that they're not good enough or don't have anything to offer?
Well, I would say there are two ways I suggest. The first one is to aim to connect with someone who has a niche audience who is likely to welcome the value that you're providing to them. So what I'm saying is, instead of trying to connect with Tony Robbins, then just find maybe a coach or trainer that you actually like their message, you feel like there's a good fit, and then you reach out to them. If the business this person has is small enough, it's likely that they will read their emails, they'll reply to you if you send a testimonial or review. And then you will see a positive result. Because what happens is, once we see something good happening out of our efforts, we're much likely to want to do it more. And like I always say, for example, if you want to be more, I want to speak up my mind. I want to be, I want to speak up my mind better. Then what do? I first start and go to Walmart and I say, I'd like to return this, right? I just want to return it. And of course, they're going to say yes. So you have a success. So then you kind of think about that. Okay, I was successful. Next time you go to a restaurant and then you ask the waiter, well, I'd like to have my vegetables done this way and my chicken done this way. The waiter will probably say yes, right? Another success. So the next time you want to speak up your mind and be assertive, you will be able to do it just because you have that momentum going. So I invite you to start small. Just start with something that you feel you're going to succeed. Notice that success and say to yourself, yes, I can do that, because you have to prove to yourself that you can do it. And another way you can do this is by just seeking inspiration by people who have been successful in spite of how small their businesses were or their terrible situations that they had going on. And once you see that, there are so many stories of success like that, then you will say, well, if they could do it, then so can I. And that's how you start.
I think those are both great pieces of advice. And one thing in listening to one of your recent podcast episodes that I picked up on, another suggestion you had for people, is what I kind of colloquially refer to as the superpower email, where you ask people around you to tell you some things. Can you talk about what that is and how that can help you get past the mindset block?
Yes, actually, that's a really powerful strategy too. And I like to encourage people to just ask others what they see as your number one skill that they value in you, right? And it could be something specifically related to one area that you want to improve on. Like, for example, I've done it with leadership. I asked people around me, what do you think? What kind of leader do you think I am? And what do you think is good about the way I lead people? What do you think I could improve too, of course? And just asking people for feedback and seeing what they say about you. First of all, might open your mind about skills that you didn't know you had. Also, things you do that people actually appreciate more than you think. I know there's a story about a doctor who asked his patients what they appreciated the most about what he did. And rather than, your skills, how you have healed me or whatever, it was like, that the waiting time is almost nothing. I just get to the office and I'm in. So he was surprised, like, oh, really? So, just asking people what they value the most about you will help you feel empowered, but also to realize things maybe you didn't know about yourself. And then you kind of, when you start focusing on that, then you can find opportunities to apply that. And you feel, again, like more capable of achieving connections with influencers.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And listeners, I'll tell you, I went through this process, and I call it the superpower email because I was in a business building program where one of the assignments was to send an email to, and they didn't give you a number, but a good number of people. And I think I sent it to 10 or 15, asking them, what are my 3 superpowers? If you had to say, what are my best qualities? What are they? And what I'll tell you is you're going to hear some things that are going to make you feel fantastic that have nothing to do with what you think you're good at. One of the themes that came up for me over and over again is that I'm a very good active listener. That, I wouldn't have thought that, but so I'm telling you, do that. It'll make you feel good. Now, of course, the other kind of issue you talked about mindset wise, I think actually kind of segues us more into the how. I mean, how do you start doing it to actually reach out to folks? And one of the things that you said is that you need to start by giving value. Why is that so important? And I mean, how does somebody go about doing that?
Yes, it's important. You know why, Bobby? Because let's say that you have a sales call, right, with a potential client. And then everything that's in your mind is about you. Like, how am I going to sell my program? Is this person going to buy from me? So when you go into the conversation, that person can sense that all you want is their money, right? So the sales conversation is likely to go down south. No, they will not buy from you. That's just the way it is. But if you go into this call with the mindset of, okay, I'm going to help this person as much as I can, I'm going to find a solution that is perfect for them, then you're much more likely to make the sale. So the same thing happens in any relationship. If you want to create a relationship with that person, right? If you're selling, in this case, your value, what you have to do is say to yourself, how can I help this person first? And that only will come to you when you do your research, basically. So that's why I love subscribing to all my connections email lists and just get their updates. And once I know they have something new coming up, maybe they have a new podcast, they have a book coming out, a program, then I know, this matters to them. I can go and help them promote that or grow that. If it's somebody new I'm connecting with, then I go to their website. I follow them on social media and see what they post. I have a story. One of my podcast guests, she said she wanted to connect with this, big entrepreneur. She has a really huge following, and she was going to this conference, and she was following her on Instagram and said, I'm leaving for the conference. Cannot wait, blah, blah, blah. So another Instagram post said that she loved brownies, right? So my guest, what she did, she actually mailed a dozen brownies to this woman right at the conference. So when she was at the hotel, she got a box of brownies and saying, hey, I love what you do. This is why, and I would love to connect with you. Well, guess what? Now they're working together. So that's what you do. You find the best possible way for you to deliver value first. And out of that, then good opportunities will come to you.
And so I'm guessing the delivering value can be things like brownies, or it can be, you mentioned before, doing or leaving reviews for people, or maybe going, if they have a Facebook group that you can join it and provide value to their tribe, which often people are very appreciative of. But I mean, what are some other ways that you suggest to people to provide value?
Well, I would say if you have a platform of your own, which is one of the easiest ways to deliver value to an influencer, then you can use that platform to promote them. So for example, if you have a podcast or a summit, a virtual summit, then you invite an influencer and your purpose is to share their message, right? To have them on because you believe in what they have to say and you're not really relying on them to do the promotion, right? It's because you want to help them. Then that influencer is likely to say yes. If you have a blog and then you write an article about them, that I've done that. That's how I connected with survival expert Craig Stewart. I was watching his show, Fat Guys in the Woods, on the Weather Channel. And it was a great show. I loved it. And I said, surviving in the woods, it's just like surviving as an entrepreneur. And this is why. So I wrote this article. I was really inspired. And I never thought he would read it, but I shared it on Twitter and tagged him. And he loved that article. So he shared it, everywhere on social media. We eventually became friends. So he wrote a story for my book, even to talk about how he grew his business with guest posting. But, that goes to show you that, you can use your platform to help an influencer. If you have a mailing list, of course, that's great. Then you can do joint venture partners for the influencer and promote their products and programs. You can become an affiliate of their products and programs. And of course, if you join one of their programs, then that's a perfect way to stand out and then help them grow their business because you can become their number one student, deliver value, and then give a raving testimonial, of course, if you like the course.
Yeah, I think that's all great advice. And listeners, I'll tell you from my own personal experience, I can tell you that is, all that advice is real and it comes in handy. I've had a boon in my business over the last literally 3 weeks because I was in a group and delivering incredible value for Amy Porterfield's group. She then asked me to be on her podcast, which led to an amazing amount of traction for me. And so I did without having read Cloris's book, I did basically what she's suggesting. And, so I think this is all a great kind of explanation of how to do it. But let me ask you now, Cloris, what do you do after you've been delivering value? What's kind of the next step in trying to connect with the influencer? And I think you refer to it as a sales process, but of actually selling them to do whatever it is that you're asking them to do.
Well, you definitely have to have a short-term objective and a long-term objective. So, for example, for an influencer who has a large podcast, your short-term objective might be to be a guest on that show. But then maybe your long-term objective is to actually partner with that influencer and do some sort of joint venture promotion. So then you have to figure out that ahead of time. What I recommend is actually organizing your influencer connections in a way that works for you. I use Excel. I just love Excel. So I have a master sheet with all of my connections. Okay, everybody who I'm connected with on LinkedIn, on Facebook, through all of the groups I belong to, everybody is on that sheet. But I have another special sheet of my top connections. So that sheet I limit, okay? The number of people there has to be small enough so I can stay in touch with them. And once I have, I would say, no more than 50 people for sure. Right now I have about 25 people. So I stay in touch with them. I know the end goal, the ways that we could work together. And for new connections, I want to focus on my short-term objective. So as soon as I gain their attention, then I deliver more value and more value on top of value, right? So once you feel that the relationship has matured, then you can ask for something, okay? But, you really have to be careful to not rush things. It's just like you plant a seed and then the next day you're like mad because you have no plant, right? You gotta let that grow and nurture that. But then if you're patient enough, then you will be able to grow that connection to a level. Then you can do an ask. And when you ask for something, though, don't give up, because there's another problem that people face. They try once. Oh, I emailed Bobby and he didn't get back to me. He's not interested. And then you feel bad about yourself. But it's not about that. You have to follow up, because you never know if people received your email. You never know what happened to that. It has happened to me. Even friends of mine, I've emailed them a couple of times. They don't get back to me, and my emails were going to their junk folder. Okay, so you definitely have to follow up and just be persistent. Of course, not stalking the person, but persistent enough.
Now, so you do this in an Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah, I do.
Have you thought about going to a CRM database or of some sort to do that? I mean, I used to, and I actually, in hearing you talk about this, I think I've decided I'm going to re-sign up. I used to use a company called Contactually.
That's right.
Where you can kind of bucket people. And it sounds like, when I think about it, it would be perfect for what you're doing, because you would have your 25 list and you can set it so that it says, hey, you need to ping them, and you could have ping be in different ways. But how often should you be, kind of trying to interact with the folks? Let's say your top 25 or top 50.
Well, I try to interact with them at least once a month. And if they have something going on, for example, somebody has a new book launch going on, then of course I'm in touch more often, because I really want to promote and help that launch as much as possible. So it depends on what they have going on, but at least once a month, though, I want to stay in touch. And for those really close connections, then I want to have catch-up calls. So say, hey, we're due for a call. So you can really, get to know what's happening and how you can help them. So I guess it varies. And if you really know that person well, then you'll know when to reach out to them, more often or not.
Okay. I think that's good advice. So that once a month, is that only for the 50 or is that for everybody? You try to have a touch point every month?
That's only for the top connections, for the top 50, I would say. If you can manage 50, if you cannot nurture these connections well enough, then you have to reduce the size of your list, because it's better to have a small group of real supporters and allies than a bunch of people who really, don't even remember the last time they talked to you and they don't even know who you are. So yeah, it's about that. And I would say for all of the other connections, if I see something they have posted on social media, then definitely say hello. But I don't stay in touch with them that often. I'd rather focus, just like everything in business, just focus on a niche, a group of influencers, or a niche audience, one product, one funnel, until you really grow that. And that's when you see results.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think listeners, you should definitely listen to that advice where don't try to overdo it. If you can only be in contact regularly with 10, do 10. Whatever you can do and start there, get in the habit of doing this, and then maybe you can expand. Now, Cloris, you've given some great advice already, but I like to think in really kind of digestible tidbits or pieces of action that people can do to get some small wins. So something they can do in 5 minutes a day or could get done by the end of the week. With that perspective, what is kind of the one piece of advice or the one thing you would suggest my listeners do to really start along the path to influencer marketing?
Well, the first thing I encourage you to do is to create a value proposition for you. So, take a step back, take a look at what you have to offer to influencers, and write it down, like actually put it down on paper, have it next to where you work and look at it so you empower yourself to create these connections. So list, these are the 10 things I could potentially do for influencers and have them close to you. Then take a small risk. If there's somebody new you feel like you would want to connect with, especially like local influencers or niche influencers, then start with that. Start to create that relationship to build value. Don't think about, much about, the end goal that you have, but just focus on delivering value. And also something that you could do actually right away is think about the current connections that you have and whether those connections could actually be perfect to collaborate with you, but for some reason you have lost touch with them, because that happens, right? We meet these people who are perfect, we share the same values, and then life gets in the way and you just lose touch. And that actually does happen to one of my students in my program, 10 Influencers in 7 Weeks. He had to find influencers to connect with to get tangible results. So he said, well, let me look at my connections that I have right now on LinkedIn. And he actually reached out to a few of them who had been close to him years ago, but then they lost touch. And he said, yeah, I'd like to catch up with you, right? So he had all these catch-up calls. Out of those calls, he got 2 contracts, a $9,000 contract, $6,000 contract within a couple of weeks, okay? Just by resuming that relationship, by reconnecting. So I encourage you to look at the current people you know already and see if you have lost touch. How can you get back in touch with them? How can you deliver value to them now?
I think that's great advice. And that's just one piece of great advice. Now, Cloris, other than someone going out and buying your book, which they should do, so listeners, go do that. How can my listeners get in touch with you, get more information about, what you do and how you might be able to help them?
Oh, thank you, Bobby. Well, they can go to ClorisKylie.com. That's my main website where you will see information about my influencer marketing guide. That is a free guide. Also, you will see a link to the book bonuses, which I'm giving as a bonus package for Beyond Influencer Marketing. I have my podcast, Beyond Influencer Marketing also, and, great guests and lessons because, the more we learn from other people who have implemented this, then the more ideas come to our mind and the more empowered we feel to do this. Because if it worked for them, then definitely it can work for you.
And listeners, I'll have links to all of that in the show notes, so you'll be able to get it and get it very easily. So, Cloris, I want to thank you. You have been great. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Bobby. It's a pleasure.
Listeners, that's it for now, but stay tuned for my quick legal lesson after the break.
And now for today's legal lesson.
Yay! Cloris had some really great advice there on how to take influencer marketing and make it part of your overall business plan and your overall strategy. And I think, I'm going to take some of the advice she had and I'm going to start implementing it more than I already was. I was already doing some of it, but I'm going to make it a focus of my marketing here in the short term because I think it's very valuable. Now, in today's legal lesson, I want to do a quick lesson about a legal concept that comes up when you are thinking about influencer marketing or any kind of marketing where you're going to be using someone else's celebrity or their platform for your business purposes. And that is the right to publicity. Now, the right to publicity is a doctrine that a lot of people don't think about and haven't heard about, but I want to give you a quick legal lesson about what it is, what it applies to, what it protects, and what you need to do to make sure that you don't run afoul of it. So let's start with what is it? The right to publicity, it's a doctrine that's protected by the laws of the different states, and each state is a little bit different, but the central concept is this. It's that every person has the right to decide how their name, image, and likeness is used for a commercial purpose. So some of that's pretty simple, obviously. Your name, that's pretty simple. You know what your name is. You know what your image is, but your likeness is something that people would recognize as you in a sense. So that's the idea behind it. And what I'll tell you is some states have broader protection than others. I think it's Indiana, for example, has a part of their law protects people's signature. So literally you can't use someone's signature for a commercial purpose. They're the ones who have the right to do that. So this is the doctrine or the legal idea that allows celebrities, for example, to make money from endorsements because a company can't use their name without their permission. And so that means celebrities, therefore, have the ability to, sell the right to use their name, their image, and their likeness. Now, the important thing, though, to understand is this doesn't just apply to celebrities. It applies to everyone. It applies to you. It applies to me. It applies to any influencer that you might want to reach out to. And that's where it comes back to. But let's talk about how it applies both to influencers, but more broadly. So in the context of influencers, the important point for you to realize is when you reach out to an influencer, you can't automatically start using their name to promote your business just because you're talking with them. Now, you can clearly promote if you are on their blog and you do a guest blog post. You can clearly promote that. You can clearly promote the fact that you were on so-and-so's podcast. But you have to just be careful if you start saying let's use a clear example. It's not okay. The official Facebook ad manager of. Well, unless the influencer has said, yes, that you are my official Facebook ads manager, you can't say that because you're implying an endorsement that does not exist. So that's one area where it comes up, is implying an endorsement that doesn't exist. But let's broaden it out from the context of influencer marketing for a second, because there's a lot of other areas where it's going to apply to you as an entrepreneur. And one of the most obvious is in the context of testimonials. If you get testimonials from people who love your brand, who love your product, who love your service, those testimonials are also subject to the right to publicity, because what you want to do is use your customer's name, probably their image, but also some information about them and from them to promote your business. That is the classic example of using someone's publicity rights. So those are kind of the areas where it's going to tend to cover. It's endorsements or implying endorsements, and then in the context of testimonials, those are the biggest things you have to think about. So what do you have to do to not get crossways with the right to publicity? Well, and this is kind of one of those areas where it kind of depends is the answer, but you should be using reasonable efforts. And why I say it depends is some states in the U.S. will allow for an implied waiver of the right to publicity. And that makes sense, right? If someone comes onto my podcast, it seems pretty clear that I should be able to use their name, their image, and their likeness to promote my podcast, even if I didn't get any express permission. If they give me their headshot and they agree to come on to my podcast, well, I mean, they understand. I mean, the whole purpose of them coming onto the podcast is for them to be a guest and for me to use it. But that being said, there are some states that require a written waiver. And technically, without a written waiver, you don't have the right to do it. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. The chances of someone coming after you, pretty slim. But the big thing is, let's say you down the road, someone who was a guest on your podcast or someone who did a testimonial for you, and you didn't get that written waiver from them, they change their mind. Well, at that point, you could get crossways with them. And so what you need to do is get a written waiver of someone's publicity rights. Anytime you're going to have a guest, you're going to use some kind of influencer, you're going to try to get it some kind of endorsement or some kind of testimonial or anything like that. Don't use it without a written waiver. Now, the good news is you don't have to do it in some big paper document. I mean, you can do it electronically. Like any other agreement, you can do things like check boxes and click boxes and things like that to get people to agree to waive their right to publicity. The important point is simply to have a record that shows that this person gave you some kind of affirmative action agreeing to allow you to use their publicity rights, to use their name, their image, their likeness, and if you did an interview, all of that information, etc. And so you get that permission from them, you get it in either written on a piece of paper or a click on something electronic, and you're in good shape. So that's today's lesson, is that you need to consider publicity rights and make sure to get waivers when you're using someone else's name, image, or likeness in your business. And it applies to influencer marketing, but other areas of your business as well. So that's it for today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're enjoying the show, I hope you'll subscribe. Next week, I've got another great episode. We're going to be talking about Facebook advertising and sales funnels on next week's episode, which is a topic that I know a lot of entrepreneurs need to know about and will like to hear about. So I hope you'll tune in next week. Until then, I'm Bobby Klink signing off.
Thanks for listening. And remember to visit mistakes.youronlinegenius.com to get your essential guide to the 4 legal mistakes that can doom your business and how to avoid them. Join us next week for another episode to expand your online genius and your success.